Hi there. It's been a while since my last episode, and that's because I've been really busy on some other projects, really exciting, but also because I wanted to kind of step back and get a perspective on the pandemic. You know, sometimes when you're covering something every day, you lose that perspective, and I wanted to get that very, very much. So here's the headline. Some things have changed and some things haven't. One of the things that hasn't changed, I'm sad to say, is the continuing politicization of science. I hate it. I've said it before and I'm going to say it again 1,000,000 times. I hate it. And one of the worst offenders is the American Psychological Association, the APA, which is a shame because they used to be a solid organization back in the 80s and 90s. I knew the president, a solid psychologist out of Yale, good guy. But now the press releases they come out with, they cross my desk, are almost always political in one way or another. It's really disgusting. So the most recent one is the statement from the president of the APA, siding with the CDC against charges that it has mishandled COVID data. All right. But what does that have to do with psychology? Zero. You know, it's gotten to the point where the APA has really become like a political action committee masquerading as a scientific organization. And I hate to say that, but it's true. They are a disgrace to the scientific community. All right, second example are public health officials. I mean, these are the scientists we look to for the best advice to fight the pandemic, right? They influence policy. They have a huge responsibility on their shoulders. Well, some weeks ago, public health officials roundly condemned peaceful protests that were starting to pop up all over the country and condemned them with very strong language because they said these protests were a danger to public health. Okay. But then, some while later, these very same public health officials praised other protests that started erupting all over the country. And in some cases, in many cases, these protests were not peaceful. They were quite violent. And not only did these public health officials praise these protesters, they joined the protests. Even the New York Times called these public health officials out for their glaring duplicity. I mean, these people are entitled to their personal opinions. I respect that. But not when they speak as public health officials, okay? No, that's not acceptable. Scientists cannot speak out of both sides of their mouth and expect to be taken seriously. They can't speak out of both sides of their mouth and expect to have any credibility. All right, so here are the things that have changed, 3 of them, all right? First, cities are reopening, and so more people are out and about. And also testing is on the increase. And so predictably, the number of cases of COVID, the number of infections is going up. You can see that very clearly in this graph. Looks kind of scary, but before you panic, take into consideration some perspectives, okay? 4 pieces of perspective. First of all, let me just share with you the big picture, the latest stats in the United States. About 43.5 million Americans have been tested. And of those, 40 million have tested negative. About 3.5 million have tested positive. About 130,000 have died. And currently hospitalized are about 57,000 Americans. Okay, so that is the big picture. Second piece of perspective is this. We have scientific models that are trying to forecast what's going to happen to the hospitalization rate because some people are worried right now. Hospitals in certain states are filling up, and that's worrying. But here's the problem. Our scientific models disagree on what's going to happen. Half the models say that hospitalization rates are going to increase slightly, but the other half of the models say no, the hospitalization rate is going to stay the same or actually decrease slightly. But none of the models predict that the hospitalization rates are going to skyrocket, okay? The third piece of perspective is this. We are much better at treating hospitalized patients now than we were months ago, okay? That's just a fact. For example, we even have some drugs that seem promising. There is a steroid called dexamethasone that seems to help really severely ill patients that are in the hospital. that might even be on ventilators or on oxygen. And then we also have mixed evidence, the jury is still out, but we have mixed evidence that remdesivir and certain cocktails of hydroxychloroquine are effective against the disease, especially in the early stages of the disease. Bottom line is that we are much better at treating hospitalized patients now than we were before. Okay, so that's encouraging. Here's the fourth piece of perspective. The death rate is falling. That's huge. All right, so now I'm going to show you a couple of graphs. The first one is where you graph on the same scale the number of cases on a daily basis. So you can see the daily cases, as I said a moment ago, is going up, and that's at the top there on the graph. But if you look at the daily death rate right there along the bottom, it's not going up. It's not following suit. It's not following the number of cases, all right? And that's very encouraging. Now, if you look at the daily death rate by itself, on a graph by itself, where you can blow it up and look at it in more detail, you can see quite clearly what's happening. Yes, there are some ups and downs, like the stock market, but the general trend is clearly downward, all right? And that's very encouraging. Now, if you look at the last several days, there is a hint that maybe it wants to go back up, but we'll have to wait about another week or so to see if that's just another blip in the stock market, as it were, or whether it's the beginning of a genuine trend upward. But right now, the daily death rate is trending downward, and that is very, very encouraging. Okay, so now the second big thing that's changed since my last episode is this. A lot of parents and teachers, according to some polls, a majority of parents and teachers are very worried about reopening schools this fall. And I can understand it. I'm a parent. I have a son who is college-aged, and, I don't want anything to harm him. That's the last thing I want. So I get it. But here's the brutal truth, my friend. There is no risk-free option to this problem right now. And if you look at the scientific research, it is very clear on the matter that the danger of keeping our schools closed is far greater than the danger of reopening our schools. And here's what I mean. We have evidence for the following negatives, okay? So stay with me. Number one, a lot of child abuse has not been reported in the last several months, okay? Child abuse that would have been reported if these kids were in school, all right? Second of all, not a lot of serious learning has been going on since schools closed. I mean, parents have done their best, but in this environment, it's really hard to get kids to stay put and learn. There's just a lot of commotion going on, so the truth of it is, so these kids have gotten behind in their studies. Third thing is that kids in poor neighborhoods, like the one I grew up in East LA, they don't necessarily have access to computers or high-speed internet, things that you and I maybe take for granted. No, they don't. The other thing is that a lot of these kids are suffering mental health issues. We have evidence for that. And that's because these kids have been cooped up for months, away from their friends, away from their teachers. That's just not good for them. And so they're having behavioral issues, emotional issues. And then also there's this, and we don't really understand why this is the case, but all the evidence is very clear about this, and that is that kids, for some reason, do not catch or transmit this COVID very easily. It's not like the flu. Kids catch and transmit the flu like crazy, but not with COVID. There's a very small chance that they catch and transmit COVID. And that's why the American Academy of Pediatrics has come out quite strongly and said, no, we need to reopen our schools this fall. There's no scientific reason to keep them closed, and there are a whole lot of scientific reasons that to keep them closed is very harmful to our kids. Of course, a safe plan has to be in place, so that means, requiring masks, social distancing, and a lot of hand sanitizer. But apart from that, there is no scientific reason to keep our schools closed this fall. So the third thing that has changed since my last episode is this: politics. As we get deeper into this election year, predictably everything, including science, as I've just explained, is politicized. Pure and simple. Now look, I think to some degree now we've gotten to the point where the political pandemic, if I can call that, the pandemic of political division is far worse, is a far greater threat to our country right now than the viral pandemic. And so as I look to the months ahead, yeah, I think we are going to beat this COVID virus. I think we're winning the war. We are. We're going to have flare-ups here and there, sure. We're going to have skirmishes here and there like we are in Texas and California and Arizona and Florida right now and some other states, but we'll get past that. But the political virus, no. And we will have a vaccine for the virus, maybe even by the end of the year. There's some promising results that we're getting. I'll do another episode at some point. But a vaccine for the political virus? I don't think so. Man, if only that were the case, right? But anyway. All right, that's it for now. As always, thank you for watching. In the meantime, stay safe, stay strong, and no matter what, my friend, no matter what you're going through, and I know a lot of you are going through some really difficult times, I urge you, stay positive.